They tried to take away my jacuzzi, but instead, I bought their pool. It all started on a hot summer day, the kind of day where the heat feels like it's pressing down on you from the sky. I had just finished filling my jacuzzi, excited to relax after a long week, when I got an official letter from the HOA. The letter was sharp, cold, and almost cruel in the way it was written. They said my jacuzzi was not allowed. They said it was a violation of community rules. They said if I didn't remove it, they would fine me every single day until it was gone. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I had bought the jacuzzi with my own hard-earned money. I had installed it carefully. I had even asked my neighbors, and they had no problem with it. In fact, many of them loved the idea. They thought it was cool. They said they might even come over for a dip someday. So when I read that letter, I was confused, angry, and honestly, hurt. Why was the HOA targeting me? Why was my small jacuzzi such a big problem to them? The more I thought about it, the more it felt personal. It wasn't about rules. It wasn't about community. It was about control. It was about power. The HOA wanted to remind me that they were in charge, and that no matter how much I paid in dues, they could still make me feel small. That thought made me furious. I wasn't going to just roll over and give up something I had dreamed about for years. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of just fighting back, I decided to do something different. I decided to outsmart them. I started reading the bylaws. I read every single line, every single rule, every single hidden detail. Most people don't do that. Most people just pay their fines, complain, and move on. But I'm not most people. I wanted to know how far their power really went. And let me tell you, the deeper I dug, the more I realized something shocking. The HOA board was sloppy. They had gaps in their paperwork. They had loopholes in their rules. They had mistakes that no one had noticed before. And all of those mistakes gave me ideas. Dangerous ideas. Bold ideas. Ideas that would change everything. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I would sit in my jacuzzi at night, staring at the stars, and imagine what it would feel like to not just fight the HOA, but to beat them at their own game. To take the thing they were trying to use against me, and flip it around so hard that they would never see it coming. That thought gave me energy. It gave me power. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't the one under attack. I was the one planning a counterstrike. But make no mistake, it wasn't easy. The HOA came at me with letters, threats, and warnings. They tried to scare me. They tried to embarrass me in front of the neighbors. They sent emails filled with legal jargon, hoping I wouldn't understand. They even had the nerve to suggest that I was lowering property values, just because of one small jacuzzi in my backyard. The hypocrisy made me laugh. This was the same HOA that couldn't keep weeds out of the front entrance, couldn't fix broken streetlights, and couldn't manage their own budget. Yet somehow, my jacuzzi was their biggest concern. And here's the hook that kept me going. Every single attack they threw at me only made me dig deeper into their flaws. Every insult they wrote only made me hungrier to win. Every threat they sent only made me stronger. They wanted me to feel weak. Instead, they gave me fire. One night, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of documents. I had the HOA's bylaws, financial records, and meeting notes spread out everywhere. It looked like the desk of a detective. And in that moment, I realized something that made me freeze. The HOA pool, the big pool everyone in the neighborhood used, wasn't even fully owned by the HOA. It was technically still under a shared property agreement from decades ago. And because of that, the HOA had failed to renew some critical paperwork. In plain words, their ownership of the pool was shaky, fragile, almost broken. That discovery hit me like a lightning bolt. I couldn't believe it. Here they were, threatening me over a simple jacuzzi, while their most prized community asset, the pool, was hanging by a thread legally. I felt a smile spread across my face, because I knew right then and there that this wasn't just about defending my jacuzzi anymore. This was about turning the tables. This was about going on offense. But let me tell you something about power. It doesn't give up easily. The moment I started making moves, the HOA pushed harder. They showed up at my door. They sent more letters. They whispered rumors to my neighbors, trying to turn them against me. But by then, I was too far gone. I had tasted what it felt like to hold a piece of their weakness in my hands, and I wasn't about to let it go. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a battle for respect. It was about proving that one person, armed with knowledge and persistence, could take on an entire board of people drunk on control. And I wanted to win not just for me, but for every neighbor who had ever been bullied, fined, or humiliated by this HOA. So I made a plan. I started gathering evidence, reaching out to contacts, and preparing my strategy like I was going into war. Every night I wrote notes. Every morning I checked loopholes. And every day I imagined the look on their faces when they would realize that the same homeowner they tried to crush was about to own the very thing they valued most. And that's exactly what I did. But before I tell you how I pulled it off, let me leave you with this thought. Never let anyone make you feel small in your own home. Never let anyone convince you that you don't have power. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person who refuses to give up, one person who dares to read the fine print, one person who decides to fight back with brains instead of fear. If you've ever been pushed around by people who think they're in control, stick with me. Because in the next part of this story, I'm going to show you how I turned their threats into my opportunity, and how I went from being the neighbor with a jacuzzi to being the neighbor who owned the pool. So don't go anywhere, because this is just the beginning. When I left you last time, I had just discovered something powerful. The HOA's prized possession, the community pool, wasn't fully theirs. Their paperwork was weak, their ownership was shaky, and their biggest weapon against homeowners was actually their biggest vulnerability. That discovery changed everything. Suddenly, I wasn't just defending my jacuzzi anymore. I was planning a takeover. I was ready to go from being the victim of their rules to being the owner of what they valued most. But here's the thing about bold moves. They don't come easy. The moment I started asking questions about the pool, the HOA got nervous. They tried to shut me down. They told me I had no right to review their financial records. They sent me legal threats with complicated words, hoping I'd be too scared to push back. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't just another neighbor who would roll over. I was a neighbor with fire in his chest and a point to prove. The first step was research. I spent hours at the county records office, digging through dusty files and old property agreements. I read documents that hadn't been touched in decades. And the more I read, the clearer it became, the HOA had dropped the ball years ago. They had forgotten to renew their legal control of the pool. Which meant, with the right move, the pool could be separated from them completely. That realization hit me like fuel on a fire. Imagine this. The same HOA that was fining me daily for a jacuzzi could soon find themselves begging me for access to their own pool. The thought was almost too good to be true. But I knew it was real, and I knew I had to act fast before they covered their tracks. So I started calling lawyers. I explained the situation. At first, even the lawyers couldn't believe it. But once they reviewed the paperwork, they all said the same thing: "You found gold." The pool wasn't locked down. It was vulnerable. It was available. And if I played my cards right, I could buy it right out from under the HOA. That night, I sat in my jacuzzi, and for the first time, I wasn't worried. I wasn't stressed. I wasn't scared. I was smiling, because I knew I was about to flip the story in a way no one saw coming. But make no mistake, this wasn't just about money. It was about pride. It was about showing them that their intimidation tactics wouldn't break me. It was about sending a message that when you push someone too far, sometimes they push back in ways you can't imagine. The negotiations weren't smooth. When the HOA found out what I was trying to do, they panicked. They called emergency meetings. They sent more threats. They even tried to change the bylaws overnight to block me. But it was too late. The legal cracks were too deep, and I had already stepped through the door they had left open. And then came the day I'll never forget. The day the papers were signed. I sat across the table, pen in hand, and with one signature, the pool changed hands. It was no longer the HOA's pride. It was mine. The same HOA that tried to strip me of a jacuzzi now had to face the fact that I owned the very thing they loved most. The look on their faces was priceless. Shock. Anger. Embarrassment. It was like watching a balloon deflate in slow motion. All their power, all their arrogance, all their threats, gone in an instant. And I have to admit, it felt good. It felt better than I imagined. But the best part? My neighbors. When they found out what happened, they couldn't stop talking about it. They came to me with smiles, with laughter, with pats on the back. They said, "You actually did it. You beat them at their own game." Some of them even admitted that they had been scared to stand up to the HOA, but seeing me do it gave them courage. That was the real victory. Not just owning the pool, not just keeping my jacuzzi, but proving that regular people have power too. Proving that bullies can be beaten. Proving that knowledge and persistence can outshine intimidation and threats. And here's the truth. The HOA never truly recovered. They tried to act tough. They tried to spin the story. But deep down, everyone in the community knew the truth. The board wasn't as strong as they pretended to be. They weren't invincible. And because of that, they treated me with a kind of respect they had never shown before. Now, every time I sit in my jacuzzi, I smile. Because I know I didn't just win a small battle. I flipped the entire war. I took their pool. I turned their rules against them. And I became living proof that no one should underestimate the power of one determined homeowner. So if you're listening to this right now, I want you to remember something. Never let fear control you. Never let bullies push you around. Never assume that just because someone acts powerful, they really are. Sometimes, all it takes is reading the fine print. Sometimes, all it takes is standing your ground. And sometimes, all it takes is the courage to fight back in your own way. The HOA tried to take away my jacuzzi. But in the end, I took away their pool. And that's a story I'll never forget. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and share it with someone who's ever been bullied by an HOA. And don't forget to subscribe, because more wild stories are on the way. And if you've ever dreamed of flipping the script on people who doubted you, let this be your reminder, it's possible.